you and I share this, like traveling internationally, and like I've been to Costa Rica, and you know, we both are doing all right with our Spanish and working on our Spanish. So when I said I'd come down here a couple of times, we spoke over the summer after I'd been here the first time, and I was like trying to raise money for this movie, and you know, you were like, man, I was in El Salvador a while ago, and you're like, isn't it dangerous? And I was like, well, no, actually, we're coming up, it was late March, I think, of 2020, 2 years ago, and Bukele, you know, I forget the name of the law, but locked up everybody. So I want to hear, I've heard from local Salvadorians what it was like before Bukele, but I want to hear from somebody that, like, not just a tourist, but you're someone who travels for a living. You don't, and when you travel, I've noticed the way you travel, you're not, I mean, you'll do some tourist things, but you really like being in the culture.
Yep.
You know, you don't like just like, where's the McDonald's? Like, you don't.
Yeah, where's the cathedral? I'm going to go see the cathedral, and then I'm going to go to the other thing that you're supposed to see, and I'm going to go see some paintings, and then I'm going to go stay at the Marriott. Like that. I'm like, let's go see the one thing, and then let's go to a soccer match. Let's go to a pub. Let's go and let's hang out with people. Let's find out what they're like. Like, to me, I like to low to the ground travel is how I like to do it. Because otherwise, it's not an experience. It's just check boxes.
Yeah, I mean, the tourist stuff is cool. There's cool stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's great to see.
But you're right. There is that experience of just like, you know, sitting, especially when they're speaking a different language, and you have to kind of figure it out. You know, you have to sort of like, how do I communicate this? And I always feel like Google Translate is the last option.
Agreed. I'd rather stumble and be terrible with my Spanish
than do that. Unless it's like really critical, then it's like, all right, I'll pull out Google Translate. But that's sort of part of the journey. You and I are very similar. Like this, like, I had to figure this out, and this crazy thing happened. We met this guy, and he met, you know, like it's like, not like getting into trouble, but just like experiencing what that culture was like. So, you know, you've traveled a lot. You're an experienced travel, but you came down here, and what year was it?
I thought it was either 11 or 12. And it was like from, I think we got down here on, it was just a girl I was dating at the time. It was, I think it was Christmas Eve through New Year's Day. So it was during the holidays. So for about 10 days? And you know, I've read a lot. One of the hobbies, I guess, hobby or study, I'm really interested in conflict, historical conflicts. And then when I like to read a lot about a place and then go there and then and sort of see either what's it like, you know, before the conflict, what happened after the conflict, where are they now? So I've been to Cuba with the revolution there. I've been here. I've been to Guatemala. I've been to, did I say Cuba already? Yeah. I've been to Sarajevo with the Balkan War. You know, I've been to Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Croatia. And like, if you go there, you get a completely different view of that war depending on which one of those places you're in.
It should be noted too, then you're obviously not like, you're not reckless, but you're not afraid. You're not like some Americans who are like, I'm not going, it's scary.
Let me tell you this. I've had one bad thing happen in my travels in my entire life. One thing, you know, not like, I had a shoe stolen on the beach or whatever. Like I've had one bad thing happen, and it was in Salzburg, Austria. Ever been to Salzburg, Austria?
Pretty nice.
It's Mozart and The Sound of Music, and it's idyllic. And I had a guy pull a knife on me there. But like I've been in central Havana, Cuba, where the streets and water, that's how you get your water. And the one bad place, the one thing that had bad happen to me was in Salzburg. And I looked at the guy like, they gotta be shitting me. Like, what? The hills are alive with the sun. He's like, yeah.
He pulls a blade on you.
Yeah. And then two cops just tackled him.
Nice.
So yeah, I'm not reckless, but I'm relatively, you know, fearless is, you know, I'm not a tough guy or anything, but you know, I think people are people, and by and large, as long as you're not sort of in the wrong spot, that you can kind of go anywhere.
Yeah, and also too, I mean, you know, you and I met in Chicago. We both kind of grew up as kids in Wisconsin, but then you live in Chicago, and you know, you're in a big city. You got to play heads up ball. You have to living in a city like that. You have to kind of have a radar on you. And when you travel, you have to kind of be like, I'm getting a vibe here that
you have to listen to your head for sure. Yeah. Like, this feels hinky to me for whatever reason.
Yeah, I don't have a good vibe. Let's get out of here. It's not worth the photo op or whatever.
Guys, you walk into a place and they, you know, and you get that, you know, they don't get not white people, I'm not saying that, but they don't get anybody from outside of that little bar community, and they look at you like, oh, what's that guy doing here? The small town Wisconsin sort of, you have the same problem in small town Wisconsin. Hey, that guy's different than us. We're going to kick his ass for no reason.
I mean, there's bars in Chicago you could walk into and they're going to go,
yeah, hey, what are you doing here? You're not, you're not from this neighborhood.
You're not from this neighborhood.
Right. So you got to listen to your head on that kind of stuff. But yeah, I came down here the first time, I've been to every Central American country. And I had a wonderful time in all of them. So came down here, and we did a little bit of the tourist trail. We went to Suchitoto up there, and I really wanted to go see that because that was sort of there's some of the rebel stuff that that was one of the strongholds rebels up there, and then also much further to the east. Like
so let's get into this a little bit. One of the things you studied about this country specifically was the Civil War from 1980 to 1992.
Yep.
So you wanted to be knowledgeable about that when you came in. You and I are very similar. I read all this when I went to Afghanistan to entertain the military. I read like the history of Afghanistan. I read the Kite Runner and was like, oh wow,
yeah, I read that book too. Yeah,
it's a great book. So coming into this and reading that book then basically kind of colored a little bit where you wanted to go, right?
Absolutely. I wanted to go see the things that were in the book. I wanted to go see the things that were, that were meaningful to that. Mm-hmm. And I do that everywhere I go. And then the great thing about that is, an example, when I lived in Istanbul, I would talk to people about Ataturk. And the Turks would lose their minds that I had taken the time to know their history and how, at the end of World War I, when they're carving up Europe, that the Turks are like, no, you're not carving us up. Like, you're not doing this thing where the French and the Italians and the English and the Americans, you guys decide that our country is two countries. Or no, we'll just continue to sit in our foxholes, and the war's not over in Turkey. What do you think of that? Like, that happened. And Ataturk was sort of the driver of that. And, but anyway, I know we're not in Turkey, but it's knowing that then the locals are like, holy shit, you took so much time to learn about us. And then then you're not there and you're completely clueless about it. You've got like a frame of reference to come into a place and then really start to absorb even more details. Right?
That's a great point before we get into what you saw. But this is, and for anybody out there, if you've never done that much traveling, I urge you to travel in these ways and to do a little reading, because I've found that in so many places when I've been to Japan, I've studied a lot about Japanese history, I've studied Japanese martial arts, I'm familiar with like the Edo period of the samurai, and when you say that to people, they go,
right, they're amazed that you know that. Yeah.
You don't just come over and they go, where's the sushi?
Right, I heard you guys make good stereos.
Yeah, it's no, I mean, having traveled to Hawaii a lot as a surfer and to do shows, and I read about the history of Hawaii and how the islands were illegally stolen in 1893 and who Eddie Aikau was, and Eddie would go and Hawaiians would be like, hey, thanks.
Right.
Like they're
so appreciative. It is, yeah.
Because unfortunately there's a lot of tourists, especially American tourists, that are just like, don't know anything and just travel and are just like, wasn't this part of Disneyland? Right. And you're like, no.
Here's the thing that can backfire a little bit on you, because in some countries, in particular, if it's a big, giant, important person in their history, right? Ataturk's a good example of that. Mustafa Kemal was the guy's name, but wonderful. He's their like George Washington.
Right.
But he did die of alcoholism and at a pretty young age. And I made a mistake of asking somebody about that. And they're like, no, guy, no, like this guy was, a saint. And this guy was like, okay, but like there's a book, like the 900-page book I read, it was kind of a big theme, it's not like,
no, it wasn't.
No, it wasn't. Right. Like, because either they just aren't taught that or they just like our country, they gloss over things. Whereas, this English guy.
Name one thing America's glossed over.
It's all very, he chopped down the cherry tree and he never told a lie. He didn't have slave's teeth in his mouth. No.
Find me an American who can tell me who Smedley Butler is, Eugene Debs, Fred Hampton, and they have to really have dug deep because none of those people are taught in the school.
Fred Hampton, I believe, was the guy who won the junkyard in that show, correct?
Sanford and Son. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, he was
Sanford and Son. Isn't that what you were talking about?
Yeah, Fred.
Lamar.
The big one's coming.
And then, he did that funny jokes, and then Chicago PD and the FBI shot him because he was a Black Panther. Right. Remember that episode?
Yeah, I remember that. Was funny. Good humor.
Good. So, no, that is. Like, I remember encountering some of that when I was in China of just like, yeah, Chairman Mao. And some people were just like, he was great.
Right. Yeah.
And you're like, Okay, great. And I can't judge them because, again, there's Americans that are just like Reagan or whatever the guy is.
Whoever your guy is.
Whoever your guy, even JFK, I'm Irish, he's great.
Yep.
I think he was our last great president, but the Kennedys.
Yeah, exactly right.
Joe Kennedy was a bootlegger,
Yep. I mean, I think that there's, I don't, we talk about you and I knew this was going to happen. You and I was going to get on a jag, and this puts me an hour and a half later, and we're like, and then the Cubs pitching is good, and then we're like, what the hell is going on with these two guys?
I know we got to be careful not to make this just about baseball, but that's why we're a baseball jersey. I'm like, we could talk about the Cubs all day. Anyway, all right, so that's to set the backdrop of that's the kind of traveler you are. You like to read stuff and research, and so part of your research wasn't just like the history of that, but specifically in the Civil War for me, because it's very pertinent, because for people who don't understand, so there was a Civil War from 1980 to 1992, roughly. The United States under Reagan very much helped contribute to this awful Civil War. There's a massacre that we've like.
And I'll say this: that's not like a left-wing thing. That's a fact. It just is. You're a lot more left than I am. Mm-hmm. I'm not right. You know that. So I'm not. But. That's the thing that when people are like, well, I don't know if that really happened. Oh, no, it did. Like, it's a documented fact that we back that terrible.
I mean, we could go with it. I have a whole nother podcast called Government Secrets with Lee Camp, where we just go through like all of the evil dictators that we backed, all of the Democratic, so anyway, there's a history of that. And why it's relevant too is because then after that ended in 1992, then the kind of gang violence took over. So this country has been in basically 4 to 5 decades of war and violence, which is why this rebirth under Bukele is so like, wow, look what he's done in 2 years. It's hard to undo 5 decades of violence in 2 years. So you've studied all this. You're in this country in 2010 and 2011, roughly. What did you see? What did you experience?
Yeah, so the first thing we did is we landed, we took a car, we drove up to Suchitoto, like I mentioned, went up there, and beautiful lake up there. It's gorgeous, very idyllic. And then the next day, I wanted to do a tour, like a horseback tour, and go up into the mountains and the jungles and go see things. But the reason I did it is that the guide was a rebel. Like he lived. Like he took us up and showed us like, oh, and then when the government troops would come and like built into the side of a hill, he like pulled a door. Like it was like something out of like a movie where he's like, yeah. And then you look down in there and there was a hole. And he's like, we would go get the village and then we just put everybody in this hole and then they would hide it until the government troops left. He was like one of those guys that like he was in the hills for like, he's about my age. So you figure 80, how was I in 80? He's a little bit older than me because I think he said like 81 to 86, he was in the hills. And he was 16 through 23, maybe 21. How the math works there. I'm not good at math, Graham. You know that. Strong. But like the guide was a rebel. And I'm just like, I'm completely blown away by it. I'm just asking him so many questions. He's like, yeah, here's where we hit people here. And this is what it was like. And we would, we'd have to try to get food and scrounge. And then, so I was just, like talking to this guy. And then you realize like what a wuss I am. Like just, imagine me, I was in college being an idiot at his age. So we did that. And then the other thing that was really cool was that afterwards I was talking to him, like after the tour, we're coming back to town. And I'm like, so what was it like being, in the hills? And he's like, he goes, it was even harder. That wasn't hard. What was hard was coming back and then being like, I need a bank card, or I don't know what an ATM is. Like the reintegration into like society after that, he said that was the really, really hard part. So, I thought that was fascinating. And then we took I think it's called the Rutas de las Flores, I believe it's called, the Route of the Flowers. And then that goes over to, is it Uea, I believe it's called. That's over in the west part. That's like the gastrointestinal capital of El Salvador. The girl that I was dating at the time is a chef, and she wanted to go see that. And then we came down to the beach for a few days, and we came back to El Salvador and flew home. So it was great, but you kind of got to do a little bit of the beach, a little bit of the history. Did a volcano a day, but did the rebel thing, which I thought was that to me that's like the most like memorable thing that happened was meeting that guy. That was pretty incredible.
And then you told me a little bit before the show, but to tell the audience some of one of the things people don't understand, like extortion was just a daily routine. It was just a part of doing business. Everybody had to, just about 70% of the population or more roughly had to pay whatever business you ran, you had to pay off somebody. I mean, you had to, and the violence I was told, I mean, Reina Chicas, who was on this show, she's with me, Premier Bitcoin. If you haven't watched that interview, please go back and watch it. She said, the gang violence affected you knew somebody. I was just talking to somebody in my Airbnb she's Salvadorian, and she said, yeah, my boyfriend owned a gym. He had to pay, and he had a friend that owned another gym or something, and that guy said, I'm not paying anymore, and they killed him. And, as I've also said on this show, it's important to notice that roughly $5 billion in extortion money was paid every year by Salvadorians to the gangs. And so when those guys got locked up, the GDP is 28 billion, roughly 20 to 30%. Everyone got a 25, 30% pay raise, basically, is what that's like. But I don't think people understand, I've talked to Salvadorians about it, what it was like for them, but to see then as a tourist here, and you weren't naive, you knew where you were coming and how to play it and not be dangerous, certain neighborhoods, but tell us as a tourist what you saw, what you were told and all that.
Yeah, and I the two things that I remember like pretty distinctly about it was we rented a car for part of the trip, and then we took a bus because I like to go lower to the ground, and you hop on a bus with people, and you got the chicken. It's I like daily life stuff. But when you were on a bus going from, say, San Salvador to YUA, apologize if I'm not saying that right. I think it's UA, actually, UA, I believe it's pronounced. It's JUA something. 11 years ago, Train, what do you want from me? But we took a bus, and every town we would go through, or if we went through a bigger town, every neighborhood we would go through, you would pull up at a light, or the bus would just stop, and nobody would get on and nobody would get off except like a teenage kid, always like a 14, 15, 16-year-old kid. And he would hop on the bus and he would shake hands with the bus driver and he'd hop off. And I'm like, I watched them, was watching, and I'm kind of taking it all in. And finally, I was chatting with this guy next to me. He just goes, there it is. There's a toll. And I go, the toll? What? He goes, yeah. When a bus goes through your neighborhood, you pay the gang in that neighborhood a toll to go through their neighborhood. So that handshake is that guy handing that guy $1, $3, $4, whatever it might be. And every public bus paid that toll at that intersection 24 hours a day, every single day. So, wow. Yeah. And it was constant. Go through, 2 stops, 2 neighborhoods, 2 stops, $2, whatever. I didn't get the amount.
To clarify the audience, because people might be going, wow, is that country of 6.5 million people? How do you come up with $5 billion? Like that.
Right.
And a large portion of the population takes the bus.
Yes. Yep.
So that's the only way to get around. So you have to pay this.
Yeah, and the bus is not going to go through that neighborhood, and then you go through a different neighborhood, and then you just got to pay that gang in that neighborhood. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So that was the first story, and I was like, oh wow. And I knew about the extortion and the graft and stuff down here. So that happened. And that was that was more like in the central part of the country, in Salvador, on the, that stuff. But then even when I came to the beach, I was staying at Atami. For people who don't know, it's one of the really nice beaches here. And
Atami is close to El Zonte, which is Bitcoin Beach, to give people a reference point.
Yep. So we went to a pretty nice restaurant. If you and I probably drove by it last night, but it was dark and I didn't see it. But there's one really opulent, unbelievable restaurant there. And then there's one that's sort of like not run down, but more of a local mom and pop kind of place, but it's right on the water. So you pull off, you're on the beach, you're looking out over a beach and a bluff and a little local cuisine. And we go in and it's just us. We're just sitting there and the sun's going down and I get a drink and the owner comes over and he's kind of talking to us, the proprietor. And we're just chatting and, guy's real nice. He sits down and he's like, hey, guys, here's another beer for you guys. I'm, finishing up right now and we're talking to him. And once again, now this is a time when Americans weren't coming here. So it was very much like, hey, like, what are you guys doing here? And this is awesome that you're spending money. So then this, once again, 16-year-old kid comes in. He goes, oh, hold on a second. Goes in the back. He's gone for 10 minutes. He comes back. He sits down. He goes, yep, that was my tax right there. That's the tax man. And I go, wait, the 16-year-old kid's the tax man? He goes, well, it's the tax man where, it's $500 a month for me. And I said, and I understood it a little bit, but I go, well, what happens if you don't pay? He goes, oh, they'll burn us down and they'll shoot me. And I said, really? He goes, yeah. He goes, I'm not joking one iota. Like, they will burn this down and they will shoot me 100% of the time. And I said, I mean, it's like Sopranos. It's like Goodfellas, right? And then he said, that the opulent place down the street? I go, yeah. He goes, I think they pay like $2,500 a month. Just off the top. And that's not your mortgage or insurance. That's your insurance, right? But I talked to I was here 8 days, and I talked to 2 people about, and those are 2 things that I saw like with my own eyes that were just stunning to me.
And again, just add the numbers up. The small place is paying $6,000 a year.
Yeah.
A small little roadside restaurant is paying $6,000 a year.
And their dishes are $8 a dish.
Yeah.
Like, it's every penny the tax is every profit that you make. They just leave you enough where you can make them $500 more. But if you could if you think they could pay $550, it'd be $550. And if you fix it up and now you're getting $600, now it's $600. Like they suck every ounce of value out of the business. And that was it was rampant down here.
Yeah, and again, the other business, the nice place was paying 25. That's $30,000 a year. The nice place was paying. So now you really see how that $5 billion a year is not that hard to get to when you're doing. I mean, a bus route.
Yep, every day. 15 buses go by every day and have to stop 35 times to pay $1.
Yeah.
Do the math on that every day for hundreds of buses.
Yes. So there's hundreds of thousands of dollars per bus per year.
Yep.
Whatever. And then you add, and again, every restaurant is paying. You didn't find the only 2. Everyone is paying this.
Yep.
Everyone is paying this. And again, everyone's, and like I said to my neighbor who told me they had a friend who was like, I'm done paying. They killed him.
Yep.
That's no joke. That's how violent it was. And so, you saw it firsthand as a tourist.
Yep.
And which is why not a lot of tourists were coming here. I know there's the only Americans were really coming here were just a lot surfers I knew would come here. But even surfers I talked to would be like, we'll go Nicaragua, we'll go Costa Rica. Probably not going to surf. They would just pass through here on a Latin American surf trip and surf here for 2-3 days, get out. I mean, Michael Peterson that created Bitcoin Beach, the first circular economy in this country. I mean, he told a story when I was on his podcast about 5 years ago. There was a kid that worked for him that got shot 40 times right outside his place. There was a gang war. I mean, one of the things that spurred the Bukele locking everybody up was right around this time last year in March, or 2 years ago, sorry. Bitcoin Beach was starting to thrive. Michael Peterson can tell the story better than I can, so I'm going to give the broad strokes. But the Bitcoin community was starting to thrive. And Bukele had already passed the law. He said it was going to happen, I think, May of 21. It became in effect September 7th of 2021, Bitcoin became legal tender. And the gangs killed some people down at Bitcoin Beach, and kind of like a
we don't have to listen to you kind of thing.
Yeah, we're running this country.
Right.
And when that happened, if I understand the timeline correctly, then that's when Bukele they had a special session and they were like, that's it, and they started rounding everybody up, and he rounded up, I don't know what the number is, but 50,000 people in 3 weeks, and then got the bulk of it. So because you couldn't have done the Bitcoin thing without the ending the extortion.
I think that had to start first.
Yeah,
for sure. It's like I've been to Colombia too, and the stopping. Now, the thing is, when you stamp it out in one place, it goes somewhere else, right? So you stamp it out in Colombia, now it's in Mexico, right? The cartels aren't going anywhere. People like drugs, so you can have a war on drugs all you want, but there's going to be
when there's 10% of the richest country to your north.
Everybody wants drugs.
There's 300 million people, 330 million Americans. And if 10% of them, that's 30 some million people who want drugs and have a need for them.
You're not going to stamp. It's stupid. So anyway, but the same thing happened in Colombia, is where they, first they had to go to war with the cartels before they could turn around the economy and do other things, right? That's what you had to do. So a similar thing here is they had to clean that up first, probably.
Yeah. So, that's an amazing story to hear that.